Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street, an XRP video here for you guys today. We will do a bit of a chart reaction towards the end of the video, of course, for this one. Before we get started, don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel. Don't forget to hit the like button if you're enjoying the content. Of course, smash the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. So welcome to the channel if you're new. And of course, welcome to those who have been with us for some time. So today's topic very much going to be around the world of XRP, and we'll kind of look at the questions really that could XRP really become the backbone of a $1 billion exchange traded fund, i.e. an ETF. So what would it mean for the token's price and the broader financial world? So we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. And if everything goes to plan, where could XRP potentially be in 10 years time? I also walk through a few elements, as I said, with the chart overaction of the last month and perhaps some predictions for the rest of 2025. Let's go straight into it. So first, can XRP easily become a $1 billion ETF in its first few months? So some articles like the one on screen right now are suggesting this based on recent quotations. So there are multiple filings at this moment in time for spot XRP ETFs in the US in particular, and many market participants believe approval could come by the end of 2025. Now, I think the original plan was supposed to be early October. Of course, there's a load of interesting things going on with the government and the SEC right now over there in the US. This has been delayed, so arguably, like pretty much the deadlines, as it were, kind of passed. Some are saying like the first couple of weeks of November, 16th of November is a date that's flying around. I mean, it kind of goes actually with a video we did a couple of days ago, relating to the 5th of November in regards to the RTGS systems and things like this, albeit most of that is UK based. There was a lot of principles out there that could be taking place in these coming weeks. So, maybe that kind of rough statement is, plausible for sure. But the logic is essentially, if the futures and regulated trading of XRP are in place, the institutional demand will be high, and therefore a spot ETF becomes definitely plausible, in those higher regions potentially. So, there's some estimates out there which, say the approval odds are around 90% or even more for these to be approved. Timing wise, we'll have to see. So yes, while nothing is guaranteed, the scenario is for sure credible. But if a spot XRP ETF launches, the idea that it could gather $1 billion in assets is not far-fetched in my opinion. So when you consider how much capital flows into popular crypto ETFs right now and how institutional demand works, it definitely kind of works out in that way. So what would that mean? Well, I guess for one, more legitimacy, more institutional money coming in, more liquidity, potential higher price, which we'll go on to in a minute because I think that's ultimately what people are interested in if you're holding XRP already or about to, or potentially looking at adding that to your portfolio. But as always, of course, there's risks, potential delays, the usual regulatory stuff, which we covered in multiple videos, right? So let's actually go into that topic around the market price of XRP. Again, we'll do the chart towards the end, but I'm just talking predominantly here that if an ETF is approved and launched, what could happen to the XRP price? So there's quite a few dynamics here. So we have to be realistic. Like there's always hype, right? And there's always the ability in our minds to go, oh, well, if it is going to more people, it will rise significantly. That's definitely possible. But let's look at the few dynamics here. So you've got institutional inflows. I'll get my words right in a minute. So that's when large funds can buy an ETF or via an ETF, which creates that ultimate new channel for the demand. So that could push the price up for sure. Then you've got the liquidity and the exposure. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about greater exposure, meaning more people see it and more people potentially consider XRP, which can definitely feed the demand side as well. You can imagine all the people that are outside the crypto exchanges perhaps not really wanting to still get involved in that. But when an ETF comes involved, whether it's through a trading platform, say Trading 212, for example, or Hargreaves Lansdowne, whatever it might be, or even through banks, it opens up the massive opportunity. So the sentiment and regulatory clarity is obviously a big thing as well still. So the approval itself becomes a positive catalyst and ultimately reduces that uncertainty, kind of looping back with what we just said with people that maybe have uncertainty in exchanges or crypto in general. When they see the regulatory clarity, that could raise the confidence for sure. So there's some analysts out there, if everything lines up, let's say everything lines up, the approvals, the broad adoption, the bullish market, etc. Some are saying like by December or the end of the year, we could see potentially between like $4 and $5.50. Now, these are always kind of speculative numbers, but if those things, do come into fruition and the increase in influx in money comes in, then it could be possible. Some are suggesting like up to $8. I mean, that's very optimistic in my opinion, but we'll see. But conversely, if things stall, so for example, delays with the SEC continuously, the weak demand potentially, you could see a slight dip from where we are today. But we'll cover that in a moment's time when we go through the chart. But for 2025, I think the ETF piece could definitely act as a major launching pad, but it's obviously not just the only factor here. So over the long term, which is what I always try and look for, especially with these kind of things, we are very early still, guys, by the way. Yes, the price was lower. I was buying XRP at like 10 cents. I haven't bought really any much more since. So, the profit's there for sure, but I've always been in the mindset of a lot of these, like even from a technological perspective, we're nowhere near the ability that it's capable of doing, right? So when it's being used or does become widely used in global finance, that price appreciation could definitely be significant. So of course it's very speculative still, but I definitely think it's plausible for sure. So we then enter what makes XRP special for the financial world in the coming decade beyond. We've covered this a few times in the past, but I think it's very important just to really tick off the top points here. So why is XRP worth holding beyond just being another crypto? So several features in my mind. You've got the built for payments aspect, so the bridging currency. So XRP is of course native to the XRP ledger, or some will know that as the XRPL, which were designed for fast, low-cost border payments. You see on the site here from Investopedia, bit of a reference point. I'll leave a link in the description. You can have a bit more of a read if you're new to crypto or XRP or just want to refresh your memory. It's always worth doing every now and then. So, for example, in this instance, the company Ripple Labs, which is of course associated with XRPL, uses the XRP token to power its on-demand liquidity product, which is ultimately there for lowering the need for pre-funded accounts in many markets. Okay, so regulatory and institutional push, this is another aspect. So many institutions will definitely want regulated crypto exposure. The ETF push, the regulatory clarity, the banking use cases, they all give XRP an advantage compared with purely speculative coins. And there's so many of those out there, right? So the path of institutional adoption is definitely arguably clearer, certainly in my mind anyway. Let me know what you think. Efficient infrastructure, so XRPL transactions settle in seconds, use far less energy, the proof of work mechanisms, they're all built with utility in mind rather than just the store of value. Now, one thing also to mention on top of that, with all those little components, is of course the cost reductions, and particularly for the cross-border payments and things like this. It can really drive the economy in my opinion. But that aside, with technology in general, so the network effect or the real world use cases, if more banks and payment providers or remittance services, like we talked about with the RTGS, if they all adopt XRPL or XRP in general, the network effectively grows significantly. So these use case matters. These are what, in my opinion, differentiate XRP to a lot of the other tokens out there. They're ahead of the game and they're very heavily involved already. So in short, XRP may be special because it bridges crypto and traditional finance, so things like payments, liquidity, etc. But rather than just being there for crypto or the crypto's sake, the big financial systems begin to adopt the ledger, and the token will therefore then have potential upside, maybe meaningful upside in significant proportions. So it might be worth, there's not financial advice obviously, but if you haven't got XRP, from a portfolio perspective, why would you invest in it? Why would you want to hold it? So you've got the diversification aspect, of course. It's always good to have a multitude of different assets in your portfolio, But I think from the like asymmetrical upside, I think given the potential catalyst, because of the ETFs, the payment use cases, everything going on in the financial world, there's definitely a big upside opportunity there, albeit with risk like there is in any kind of investment. But I think we're still in the early stage of adoption here. Now, not necessarily the early stages of crypto in terms of trading it and getting involved with it from a portfolio perspective, but in terms of adoption in the real world, I think we're so early still. So this may still be in the early payments crypto story, but if XRP executes this like significantly well, it's highly regarded and in the best position, in my opinion, to capture that value, that opportunity. And then from an investor's perspective, who believe in the coming decade of digital finance, like I do, and the crypto infrastructure in general, the payments disruption, however you want to relate this to the financial system in today's world, I think XRP fits that theme very well as well. So they're my kind of like key critical points why I would be saying that that's a reason why you would probably want it in your portfolio. Of course, as always, crypto remains highly volatile. There's still risk with the regulations at the moment in time. Adoption is never guaranteed, but I do think XRP is for sure showing some great positive signs there. Before we get into the chart, let's just really quickly talk about some price speculation for the next maybe 10 years. As I said, I'm a long-term holder of XRP. Some people trade this in short-term. They take profits like I do as well, of course. But I think looking at that longer-term plan, moving back to that point about the early stage of adoption, what happens if this all goes to plan? Of course, speculative, but what could we assume? Well, the assumptions here, we got the potential of the ETF very, very close, right? The XRPL, the XRP gains, substantial adoption, cross-border payments, liquidity services. You've got the market cap of XRP, which is growing substantially all the time. Tens of billions, if not more, over these coming moments. And then you've got the crypto market itself, which is, of course, like maturing, becoming more integrated with finance in general. So if today's price is around, 250, I think we'll look at the chart in a second. If that can remain stable in terms of supply and things like that, of course, I think it was today, actually, 1st November, as a recording, they release more out of the escrow, right? So I know some of that gets reinvested, it gets used back into the system, helps with, I think, like the volatility and things like that. So, in some hyperbull cases, some people are saying maybe in 10 years' time, $100 plus. I think you can kind of look at it in maybe incremental stages. So like £12 or $12.50, sorry, as a 5 times increase from now. You got 20 times increase, $50. Some saying maybe 40 times plus, $100 plus. I think this all really depends on this XRP becoming a major global bridge currency. And the market sentiment for me is quite bullish on this in that sense, but many scenarios could yield a bit lower than what's been hyped up. So for an estimate, if things go well, in my opinion, and people can blast me left, right on this, because some people will say, oh, that's too conservative, it's too low, it's too hyped. But I think realistically, and I think we'd all be pretty happy with this anyway, even if we were investing at these current price points, I could imagine maybe a $30 to $50 range as plausible for a 10-year target. I think a lot of money, like a significant amount of money, has to come in to get to $100 or more. But I'll probably reassess that maybe this time next year when we see some of these ETFs live and a bit more of the adoption process going forwards. But if the adoption fails or regulation gets a bit more stringent or difficult or delaying further, it could remain more stagnant. Not suggesting it's going to stay for 250 for a long, long time, but it could be something that drags out quite slowly. And that's where I think with maturity of investment, I think that's where you have to be quite realistic. Things are quite rare to find something that jumps up really significantly over a long period of time. It's something that's usually gradual with a lot of dips, a lot of rises in between that moment in time. So on that note, let's have a quick look at the chart from the last month and perhaps for the rest of the 2025. So you see XRP is trading around $2.50. Depending on the exchange, they can vary in prices, but we'll just go with this one that's in front of us. So there's been volatility, as always, some pullbacks, consolidation as market digests the ETF narrative and the regulatory signals. of course, what happened with the market in general a couple of weeks ago, doesn't always help. But some analysts mention that ETF optimism is already priced in to some extent. So almost potentially offsetting some of that risk that we could have had if other things were in play. But we see that volume and momentum may be building, but a breakout is yet to occur. So this support zone, in terms of the resistance to watch, I think is very important. So I think we've seen resistance on the upside between that sort of $3.50 and $4. So near the term target zones, in my opinion, and based on the fib levels that we got here. And further up, if of course the momentum kicks in, could take us well beyond that $4. But I think the ETF is a catalyst. If it happens, there's probably likely going to be a breakout. I think the excitement of it. If it's delayed, I think you're going to get a bit more stagnant. I don't think it'll fall back too much. We see the support levels here and here, but we'll have to see. So the prediction for me at this moment in time, if the ETFs do get approved and we have the good market conditions elsewhere, I think we could see that $4 to $6, maybe up to $6 by end of 2025. I'd be surprised if it goes higher than that. I think we need to see more financial, actual bridged adoptive news for it to go to say maybe 8 to 10 years. It's not, it's not impossible, but I think up to $6 is probably quite safe in terms of prediction. But also, as we see in the fib levels here, those kind of support levels, you have to see, obviously there's a couple of areas. The all-time high, for example, needs to be smashed through. We need to get support around there, and we've only got like literally 2 months till the end of the year, right? Or less than 2 months now. So feet on the ground for me, but let us know in the comments below what you think in terms of the price predictions for the rest of the year, or what you think about the next 10 years as well. So let's just be clear on that. I think emphasis definitely on the next 3 to 6 months are likely the critical window. The ETF decision, the institutional flow potential, payments adoption signals, this will likely drive whether the breakout happens or not. So in conclusion, guys, first of all, thanks for watching. But that $1 billion ETF scenario for XRP is definitely plausible. I think it could be a major catalyst for the token, for sure. Maybe even the market in general as well. So potentially lifting its price significantly. We've kind of discussed the XRP speciality, what makes it so interesting, the utility of payments, liquidity, the institutional pathway, all of those great things. And I think for the long term, who believe in digital finance infrastructure like I do, holding XRP, in my opinion, makes sense. But of course, you always have to be aware of the potential shortfalls of markets in general, and crypto, of course, in general. They're never guaranteed. But yes, we're watching for that ETF approval. We'll keep an eye out for it. We'll do videos on that for sure as and when we get news, if and when they happen. Thanks for watching. If you like the content, as I said, please do subscribe. If you haven't done so already, smash the like button. Drop a comment below. What do you think the price of XRP will be by the end of the year? Until next time, happy investing. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.